Hey, it's Coach Latham, and we're getting ready for your geometry SOL, and today we're going to talk about slope, distance, and midpoint in under 15 minutes. So anytime you're given 2 points in a coordinate plane, there are kind of 3 things that you might want to try and find about them. First one is, what is the incline from A to B? This line is either going to be flat, or it's going to start going up, or it's going to start going down, but every line is going to have some sort of incline that we're going to try and figure out. The second thing that we want to know is, how far is it from A to B, the distance of that line segment. And then another thing that becomes important in geometry is, where is halfway between A and B? So we're going to talk about these 3 things today. First one that we're going to talk about is slope. And if this is not enough explanation for you, we have an entire video devoted to slope, so you can go back and take a look at that. This is supposed to be a review for the SOL. Well, the incline between any 2 points is called the slope, and the slope is always the rise over run. That's how high you go versus how far over you go. And then I've got the slope formula over there, y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. I've got 2 different questions on this. The first one says, what is the slope from the graph? And what that means is, how many steps up do you go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You go 8 steps up. How many steps do you go over? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you go 8 steps up, 6 steps over, so you get a fraction of 8/6. So what you do now is just reduce the fraction. 8/6 will reduce to 4/3. And so 4/3 is the slope of that line. So if you get a picture, all you got to do is count up or down and over, and you get the slope. If you go up and over, the slope is positive. If you go down and over, the slope is negative. The second part of this problem says, what is the slope from the formula? That really means, what if you didn't have a picture? Instead of having a picture, what if you were just told that the 2 points on the line were -1, -1, that's point A, and you were given the coordinates of point B, which is over 5 up 7, so the coordinates of point B is 5, 7. So if you didn't have a picture, but you had those 2 points, how would you figure out the slope? You're going to subtract the y's on the top. It's going to be -1 minus 7. You're going to subtract the x's on the bottom. It's going to be -1 minus 5. -1 minus 7 is -8. -1 minus 5 is -6. And when you reduce that fraction, it comes out to be 4/3 again. So you get the same answer either way. So this is how you'll find the slope under any condition. The next thing we're going to talk about is distance. And the distance is built on the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagoras was the guy that came up with a proof for the right triangle. And he said, if you know the 2 short sides of the right triangle, you can always find the length of the third. The Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If you take the square root of both sides, c is the square root of a squared plus b. And you can think of a as being the difference in the height, or the y difference. And you can think of b as being the difference in the width, or the x difference. And when you put them all together, you get the distance formula. All right, so what we want to do is find the distance for line segment AB here. We're going to start out doing the same thing we did before. We're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we're going to go over 6 to get to B. Now this is always going to make a right triangle because we went up and over, so we have a 90-degree angle built in. Using the Pythagorean theorem, or just coming from the graph, we know that the distance squared is going to be equal to the 2 sides squared, which is going to be 8 squared plus 6 squared. You get your calculator out, and d squared is going to equal 64 plus 36, which ends up being 100. To get your final answer, you would take the square root of everything, and d would be equal to 10. So this distance right here is 10. That's just an application of the Pythagorean theorem. Before, we said that the coordinates of these 2 points were -1, -1, and the other point was 5, 7. And so if we didn't have a picture, how would we do it? Well, we would use the distance formula. In that case, the distance would be equal to the difference of the x's squared plus the difference of the y's squared. The x's are -1 and 5, so it's going to be -1 minus 5 squared. And the y's are -1 and 7, so it's going to be -1 minus 7 squared. And then you're going to work it out. Your calculator will do the heavy lifting here for you. -1 minus 5 is -6, and -6 squared is 36. -1 minus 8 is -8, and -8 squared is 64. It should start looking familiar. 64 and 36 gives you 100. And the square root of 100 is 10. So again, we can find the distance. Either way, if we have a picture, it's good just to make a right triangle. If you're given the 2 points, you'll use the distance formula. All right, we've got the slope and the distance, and now we're going to find the midpoint. The midpoint is really the easiest part of this. Again, we'll just go ahead and refresh ourselves that this point was -1, -1, and that this point was 5, 7, and we're looking for the halfway point going up line AB. So all we're going to do is average the x's and average the y's, and we will come up with the midpoint. So our two x coordinates are -1 and 5. So it's going to be -1 plus 5. You can use your calculator if you need to. -1 plus 5 is 4, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with the y's. The y coordinates are -1 and 7. So it's going to be -1 plus 7 divided by 2. -1 plus 7 is 6, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the midpoint is going to be the point 2, 3. Let's check it out and see if it looks right. We go over 2 and up 1, 2, 3. Voila! There's the midpoint on the graph. So right now what I want each of you to do is to take a few minutes and study this one and tell me the slope, the distance, and the midpoint. All right, we've got a picture here. This one's going to be pretty easy for us to do. The first thing we want to do is find the slope. To find the slope, we go up 1, up 2, up 3, up 4, up 5, and over 1, 2, 3. So the slope for this line is 5/3. It doesn't reduce, so that's your actual answer. Don't make these things any harder than they are. Now, we already have the two short sides of our right triangle. We've got a 5 and a 3. So the distance squared, I'm just going to go ahead and say d squared, is going to be equal to 5 squared plus 3 squared. This is where your calculator takes over. 5 squared is 25. Let me make a little room here. 5 squared is 25, and 3 squared is 9, and when you add those together you get 34. So the only thing left to do is to take the square root of 34, and when we round that to the nearest tenth, we get 5.8. So 5.8 is our best approximation of the distance between those 2 points. Finally, we're going to find the midpoint. The midpoint is the one where we always have to know the coordinates of the endpoints. This endpoint right here is over 2, up 2. And this endpoint up here is over 5, up 7. So we're going to average the x's, 2 plus 5 divided by 2. And we're going to average the y's, 2 plus 7 divided by 2. And 2 plus 5 is 7. 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. 2 plus 7 is 9. And 9 divided by 2 is 4.5. So let's check and see if it looks right. Over 3.5, up 4.5. Well, over 3.5 is right here. And then up 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Shazam! That one looks good for being the midpoint. So we now know how to find the slope, the distance, and the midpoint when we're given a picture. Okay, so that one is one where we're given a picture again, so that one's pretty easy. Let's go ahead and try one more like this. So go ahead and give this one a shot, and then we'll check back in and see how you did. Okay, here are your answers. If you want to check yourself, you can go ahead and hit pause, compare your answers to what we got. We're going to move on and do one that doesn't have a picture. So here's one that we're going to have to work out based on the points. Let's start with the slope, and if you remember, your slope formula is always going to be the change in y over the change in x. So we're going to subtract the y's on the top. It's going to be 6 minus 2 on top, and then on the bottom we're going to subtract the x's, 2 minus 5. And 6 minus 2 is 4. 2 minus 5 is negative 3, so the slope is negative 4/3. Now for the distance is going to be equal to the square root of the change in x squared plus the change in y squared. In other words, the lengths of those sides. We're going to subtract the x coordinates to find those distances. So let's see, the x's are 2 and 5, so it's going to be 2 minus 5 squared. The y's are 6 and 2, so it's going to be 6 minus 2 squared. Do a little arithmetic here. Let's see, 2 minus 5 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is 9. 6 minus 2 is 4. 4 squared is 16. So distance is equal to that. And 9 plus 16 is 25. So it's the square root of 25, which works out to be 5. So 5 is the distance between these points. Finally, we'll find the midpoint. And remember, the midpoint is the average of the x's and the average of the y's. So the x's are 2 and 5, so it's going to be 2 plus 5 divided by 2. And the y's are 6 and 2, so it's going to be 6 plus 2 divided by 2. We simplify this, and 2 plus 5 is 7. 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. And 6 plus 2 is 8. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that would be the midpoint. So go ahead and use this as your guide if you need to, and I've got one for you to try. So go ahead and hit pause right now and give this one a try. Okay, so I'm almost out of time. I've got the solution here for you on the board. The slope of this one is going to be 0 because you're going to get 6 minus 6 on the top. The distance of this line is going to be 10, and the midpoint is going to be 7, 6. Because the slope of this line is 0, it looks a little unique. This is a horizontal line, so I kind of sketched a picture of it here. The 2, 6 and the 12, 6 are the endpoints of this. You can see that the distance would be 10 when you look at a picture of it, and the midpoint is going to be right here in the middle at 7, 6. So this is everything you need to know about distance, slope, and midpoint for your geometry SOL. Again, I would advise you to check out the video that I have solely on slope. If you have any questions about this, make sure that you see your math teacher before you take the test. Now, good luck and keep studying.